Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 Index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been a barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Tuesday afternoon, we have Shawn, Cruz, Manager of Trader Services at TD Ameritrade, to discuss Nasdaq-100 levels to watch with rotation into value and cyclicals. Shawn, let's take a look at the first couple of charts here on the Nasdaq-100.
Yeah, so this week, I think there's much due being given to the fact that we're starting to see a little bit of a rotation here into value or cyclicals, however you want to view that. And that certainly is the case, Jill. We've been covering this all year long. I didn't think the time would come anytime soon, at least, where we would see the Russell actually outperforming all the other major indices. And that certainly has been the case this week. It's a lot of that, I think, has to do with financials. But if you take a step back, I mean, there's still a lot of ground for these other indices to make up. The Nasdaq 100 is still up 30% on the year. And when you have some of these other indices sort of languishing the way that they have been, I do think it makes sense if you get a game-changing headline in terms of shaping the macro picture towards a more reopening or the real economy maybe gaining some strength in the future. I think it does make sense that you are going to see a lot of flows into some of those more cyclical names. But if you take a step back and look at the year, this is barely even registers as a bump in the road for what we're seeing. And we're looking at volatility in the Nasdaq 100, looking at that VOLQ, which is the measure. Even though it has moved higher here the past session or two, it's still well off of some of those levels we saw it at even a week or two ago after it gapped lower. So I think that to me means you shouldn't expect a major rout in any of these big growth or tech companies anytime soon. If it was, I would expect to see VOLQ moving significantly higher, at least back to some of those levels we had seen it in prior weeks.
We're also hearing more about yields over the past couple of weeks as well. What are you taking a look at there?
So yields, there was always that level around, everyone had that 80, 85 basis point level. Then some people started looking at 90. We've popped up and we're really challenging that 1% threshold. So right now I'm looking at if there is going to maybe be a little bit of a resistance level we hit here, because we were here back in June. But if not, then it will be interesting to see how much higher we can go. And also in that regard, also looking at what that means for financials, because if you think about it, the financials, that's sort of been a little bit of an overhang, especially on the regionals. So some people like to look at the big banks, some people like to look at the regionals. The Philadelphia Exchange actually has a pretty good banking index that it puts out that I like to look at, because it's a very diversified financial index where you get asset managers, you get regional banks, you get some of the big banks. I think it gives a more complete picture of what's going on in the financial sector. Certainly having a solid week. And I think if you rewind to 7 days ago, Jill, we were actually discussing this same index then as well, in terms of some of the strength we were starting to see. And as you've seen yields continue to move higher and really pop higher here, you're seeing this index also pop higher with financials getting a little bit of strength, especially if that net interest margin or interest income component continues to improve here moving forward.
Yep, Felix KBW Index. Shawn, thanks as always for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.